the AND keyword. We already kind of looked at this in a previous query we wrote, but what does it actually do? So let's refresh our memory here. When we do select first and last name from users, we know we're getting the full list of users back with their first and last name as the data we'll see. But when we do the filter with the where, well, here's where it becomes interesting. When we do first name equals Mo and last name equals Beanie, we are now telling our filter to only filter on that first name and that specific last name. So both those criteria need to be met in order for a subset of data to come back to you. And that's what makes the AND keyword so powerful. You're now saying this and this need to be true in order for me to get any data at all back. And that is what is interesting. We are now selectively filtering our list based on 2 criteria. And you can do 3 criteria, 4 criteria, 5 criteria. You can link all of the AND keywords you want together. But be wary, because the more filters you put in, the less chance you have of getting anything back, because there may not be anyone that meets all of those search criteria. So when we look at the AND keyword, if we were to do the where, Mo and Beanie as first and last name, well, then we know we are only going to get back one result from this table here. Only one result matches both those criteria. And that's what makes the AND keyword so powerful. We can now chain multiple criteria to be met on a single row of data. So when we look at a row of data, well, we have Mo Beanie first and last name, but Mo Beanie has a gender, right? That's male. He has a date of birth. He has all of these criteria that are linked to that single row of data in that table, that specific table that we're looking at. And as long as we write a filter where all of the data that we're putting in that where clause match a single line of data in that table, we can get an outcome, which in this case is Mo Beanie. Now, that said, I can hear you say, Mo, I got this. I know what the AND keyword does. Great. That means we can move on and we can look at something more complicated. What if you want to filter on 2 first names? Well, you want to say first name is equal to Mo, or first name is equal to someone else's first name. You want to filter on both Mo and Andre. Let's go try something out here. So here we are in Valentina Studio. And if we go to our schema and we go to the employees, we can see here first name Georgie and first name Bezalel. So what if we wanted to filter out both Georgie and Bezalel? Well, let's try it with the AND keyword. So let's copy their first name and let's go in here and let's say where first name equals Georgie. So what is that going to give us? Well, that's going to give us all of the Georgies. There seem to be multiple. Okay, so let's say and last name equals, and let's go get their last name real quick, Facello. So let's grab that out of there and let's put it in here. So now we have 2 Georgie Facellos. Okay, we have 2 in our database. So that means we need a 3rd criteria to filter them by. So let's see what their gender is real quick. Do they have the same gender? Okay, so they're both male. So the only other criteria we can filter by is their hire date. So let's see at their hire date. Does it differ? Yes, it does. So we want to get this specific Georgie. So let's copy that. And let's say that we pulled their last name and their hire date. And let's say and hire date equals, let's filter that out. And here we got it, one single result. But now we also want to see Bezalel's data. So what would happen if we do and the first name equals Bezalel? Well, now we're getting into complicated territory. Nothing's going to come back because there is an order of operations. What do I mean by that? An order of operations. Well, here we can see we're doing where first name equals Georgie and last name equals Vasella. And then we're checking the hire date. So now it becomes complicated, right? And then we want to say, okay, but we also want Bezalel's information. So how are we going to get that? Well, our filter here is extremely specific, right? Well, we're filtering on 3 core principles or 3 core pieces of data that link to Georgie. The first name, the last name, and the hire date. And so how are we going to get Bezalel's information? Well, that's where we get the OR keyword. So what would happen if we put in the OR keyword? Because, well, stands to reason that if we say OR the first name equals Bezalel, that it's now going to change what we're filtering on. Because when we say first name is Georgie and first name is Bezalel, that doesn't really make sense, right? You can't have 2 types of first names in a single field. So we're trying to filter out different people here. So just think of it this way. When you do AND, you're checking that piece of information, that specific piece of information that we're looking at, like first name, matches both those criteria at this point. But when you do OR, you're saying OR the first name equals Bezalel. So let's see what that does. Okay, so now we've gotten back multitudes of information, but we only want this Bezalel. So let's filter on our last name as well. And last name equals Simmel. So let's execute that. Now we only have 2 people back. Okay. And so remember when I talked about the order of operations? Well, because we're doing where first name Georgie, last name Facello, and hire date equals, we're saying if all of this matches or all of this matches. But what if I threw a chink in the chain and I put this over here? What would happen then? We're saying where first name is Georgie or first name is Bezalel and last name is Simmel and last name is Facello and the hire date is equal to. Okay, now it's getting complicated. So let's frame this in a way that makes sense. Where first name equals Georgie or first name equals Bezalel and last name Simmel and last name Facello. Now we just said that when we filter on 2 last names with ands, weird stuff happens. So let's execute this. Oh, now we're getting a lot of Georgies back. Why is that? Okay, so let's take it back a step. When you do where and you do a filter, there is something called the order of the operations, which means that the way in which you structure your filter is the way in which SQL will check certain things. So when SQL sees an AND, it's going to chain that AND to the previous statement it was checking. And when it sees an OR, it's going to start checking a completely different thing. So when it does first name equals Georgie, it's only going to look for the Georgies. And then when OR comes along, it's going to say, okay, well, now I need to start looking for other things. So I'm going to do first name and it's going to chain all of those ands together. So if we took over here, so if we look in our data over here, we're not going to see any Bezalels. We're only going to see Georgies. And why is that? Well, that's because there is no Bezalel with last name Simmel and last name Facello and the hire date equal to. So if we took this information and we put it back up here, what we'll see is that the order of operations is based on the OR clause. So where SQL sees the OR is where it's going to start doing a new filter, so to speak. It's going to check either this or this other thing. And then the AND keyword, they link back to the previous. So where first name equals Bezalel and last name equals Simmel. So it's going to check the first name and the last name where this OR clause started. So if we were to put braces around it, it would look something like this. These are the statements related to this filter. And these are the statements related to this filter. And the way that we look at it is where the or comes in. So let's execute this again. And you'll see that parentheses, they help you structure your filter in a way where you can understand what is happening in what order. So, didn't I say filtering can become complex? And it really can really quickly. Because when you go down the rabbit hole of wanting to filter out multiple things, it can become very tricky for you to say, well, I want to filter out this person and this person based on this information and based on this salary group or based on these criteria. And here we're just filtering out two separate people, very specific separate people that we saw here, 10001, 10002. And we could have just as easily done it with the employee number and done like where employee number is 10,001 or employee number is 10,002. But what if we didn't know that information? What if we only knew their first and last name and when they were hired? Well, that's when this comes into play because as you could see, we had multiple Georgies and we had multiple Bezalels. And we even had two Georgies with the same last name. So we had to add in the hire date to very specifically target them. I hope that this is not overwhelming you just yet because we're just getting started with filtering. And it's going to become so amazing, all the things you're going to be able to do once you master this principle. Now, I just quickly want to summarize everything that we learned here. When we do a filter, when we do a where clause, there is an order of operations. There is an order in which the where is going to look at criteria. The and keyword helps you chain together multiple criteria to filter. So when you want to filter out a specific group, all the ands will be chained together. The moment the where clause finds an or, it's going to start a new filter. It's going to look for other things, potentially a different set of information that could also be matched. See, we could just as easily have done where last name is equal to Simil or the last name is equal to Facello. So if we just did this, what would we get? Where last name is equal to Facello or last name is equal to Simil. Well, let's execute that. And now we get a lot of information because we're saying, well, if your last name is Facello or your last name is Simil, give me your information. There is no strict criteria. But you can see very strictly now how the and keyword filters out that Facello line more specifically, or filters out that Simil line more specifically. So we're adding to the specific filters of where that or clause is. So that or clause actually separates out what we can do, what road, what path we're going to take. It's this filter or that filter. And that filter could be more specific than the previous filter. So we're saying this or this. Pretty straightforward, right? So we started off with the question, what if you want to filter on two first names? And we saw how the and keyword doesn't really work for that. But the or keyword really does help. So if we did select first and last name, where first name is equal to Mo or first name is equal to Andre, we can clearly see how our filter is working in this case. Because an and keyword over here would say, well, the first name has to be Mo and the first name has to be equal to Andre. There's no way that a filter could understand that. The first name can only have one value. It cannot be Mo and Andre. That would be impossible. How could you have two sets of values in a single field in a table? A first name cannot be equal to both Mo and Andre. But a first name can be equal to Mo, or a first name could be equal to Andre. And that's how we get into that more specific filtering mechanism.